Let me introduce you to everyone is looking for. No, I know, but yesterday lots of people were not here. I was looking for Sucharita to do the honors. It's okay, we'll start. Now we are on to the last session. I'll introduce our chair, and after that we'll go on to the main speakers.
It's enough to say that I teach at Jamia.
Okay.
That's fine.
Professor Nishat Zaidi teaches at Jamia, but she has got a long list of translations, and she'll tell you about that also. And thank you so much for being here. She's not been well, but she has come here to chair this session. Thank you.
Thank you, Chandradi. And thank you all for joining the Team TBR on this special occasion of 2 days seminar. Since yesterday, we have been discussing various dimensions of translation, what it is to translate from one Indian language into another Indian language, or from Indian languages into English. What is the objective of translation? Why do we translate? For whom do we translate? How do we negotiate with the different life worlds that different languages encapsulate? And as a translator, how do we navigate these differences? How we straddle these differences? So these are the questions on which very esteemed speakers have been sharing their thoughts and experiences since yesterday. Now, as we are moving towards the concluding session of this 2 day symposium, it is time for all of us, because I know that in this hall, everyone who is sitting here is either an active translator or an active reader of translations. So everyone is actively involved in the process of translation. And in a multilingual, multicultural country like India, no one can really say that he or she has nothing to do with translation. Translation is what we do every day on daily basis. So in this particular session, we have four very esteemed speakers. Is there any specific order, or should I? You'll go in the end. All right. So I'll start from this side. We have Professor Himansu Mohapatra with us, who translates from Oriya, and he is also a scholar of English literature. Now, this is something that that perhaps all of us need to talk about separately. Why is it that, like digital humanities, translation studies also constitute a very special segment of departments of English? So if you look at institutional platforms, it's always with the Department of English, even if we are talking about vernacular translations. So Professor Himansu Mohapatra is a critic, translator, and former professor of English, Utkal University. He has translated the Oriya novel Collective Basanti, Writing the New Woman, which was published by Oxford University Press. Jagdish Mohanty's industrial novel Battles of Our Own, which was published by Penguin in 2022. Ganeshwar Mishra's epistolary novella Letters to Jorina, which was published by Authors Press in 2021. J.M. Jordar's memoir Following My Heart, which was published by Dholi Books 2023. On his own, he has translated the life and times of Banka Harichandran. Harichandans, my apologies, this is the usual error that or mistake that most North Indians make, we Sanskritize. So my apologies. Currently, he reviews fiction and translation in Odisha Bytes, a digital news and views portal from Odisha. And of course, he's a regular reviewer for the book review. I have known him as a very serious scholar, and I have been chasing him to translate something for me also. So, what issue, Himanshu?
Thank you very much, Nisha. And to everyone present in this hall, my warm greetings. I begin with a very sincere and warm note of thanks to Chandrachari, to Uma Iyengar, and to Adnan Faruqi and the team TVR for hosting this wonderful seminar. Uh, After I became an official translator, and which is not very long ago, it's after my retirement in 2018 that I was reborn as a translator. So after that, this is my first major translation seminar I'm attending for the first time, and I have learned a lot during these 1.5 days, and I'm very happy to be speaking about what happens in my state. Um, it so happens that I am the only speaker from Odisha in this seminar, so that actually obliges me to speak a little bit about the translation scene in Odisha, rather than talking about how I translate, what I translate, and why I translate. That is something that I would like to do. So, translation for me is not just taking one language to another language to enrich another culture. It is also primarily an attempt for me to re-engage myself with my own roots, to understand Oriya better, to understand Oriya literature better. Many of the esteemed speakers spoke about how they came to their own vernacular languages after a prolonged journey in English. So first they were alienated from their own roots, and then subsequently, by through experience and through a number of different circumstances, they return to their roots. And it is the same with me. I have tried to understand and reconnect myself with my roots through translation. And this is what the published books that Nishat read out, this is what they try to do. But I'll just give you a small example of what I have tried to do. Over 60 years ago, I learned this song from my grandmother. My grandmother used to say this song to me when I had not even gone to school. And this was my first initiation into literature. And the song was very simple. I'll read it in Oriya, and then I will also present a translation of that in English. ପଢ଼ିବି ନାହିଁ ମୁଁ ଖେଳିବି ଖେଳ ଖେଳ ପଡ଼ିଆରେ ଲାଗିଲେ ଶୋଷ ପିଇବି ପାଣି ବାଡ଼ି ଗଡ଼ିଆରେ ଲାଗିଲେ ଭୋକ ମାରିବି ମଉଜ ମୁଢ଼ି ନଡ଼ିଆରେ ରାଗିଲେ ବାପା ପୋଡ଼ିବି ଘର ନିଆଁ ବଡ଼ିଆରେ. So a rough translation of this. Not for me school and book. In the ground outside I shall play. The cooling water from the pond will slake my thirst. When hunger gnaws, I'll make merry with puffed rice and coconut. For father's flaming eyes, I don't give a damn. To torch the house with a firebrand, ready I am. So this was my initiation into the world of literature. And for 60 years, I waited until I became a translator so that I could revisit it and translate it. And I'm very happy that last year I published an article called What is Literature, in which I gave a rendering of this and the translation. So this is what translation has been for me, to understand my own culture, my own literature, my own language better. And then there is a bonus if this translated text also reaches a wider audience and also enables them to understand the important texts, the seminal texts in my language and literature. So since I'll not be speaking about my translation and what I do and how I go about it. I would like to present a very brief overview of what is happening or what has happened in the translation scene in Odisha. And I give particular importance or focus to the Odia, English language translation scene in Odisha. But first, I will start with a very interesting fact. The very first printed text in Odia was published in 1807, the first printed text, and it is a translation. A Bengali poem by one Pitambar Singh was published by Sirampur Mission Press under the title of Asray Nirnay, Refuse Ascertained. But this is not what underscores the centrality of translation in Odisha. The evidence of that centrality is how a huge and significant corpus of poetry produced during the medieval period by Sarala Das, Balaram Das, and Jagannath Das was born of translation in its triple form as localization, resistance, subversion, and also compliance. This body of work became not only the backbone of Oriya culture, but also the benchmark of what is defining in Oriya language and literature. The year 1807 marks the beginning of the print era in Odisha, and translations thereafter began to play a specific role from here on, reflecting the shifting temperament and mood of an evolving society. Now, the translation from 1807, once the print era began, from 1807 to 2004-5, saw a huge corpus of translation. A scholar of translation studies in Odisha, Professor Paul St. Pierre, he is a professor of translation at Montreal University, but he has made this his topic of research, and he has studied this field, this corpus of title from 1807 to 2005. A total of 6,734 titles were published, and he has studied how these titles were published in 4 different phases, 4 different moments. I just want to focus on one particular moment that was from 1942 to 1973, and this phase is, he calls it, the phase of internationalization. What is that internationalization? This is when 2 major projects in Oriya literature were taken up, one by Grantha Mandir, which published a series of about 100 books, translations, retold versions from world literature, mostly British and American literature, Vishwa Sahitya Granthamala, and the other was another project started by a publisher, printer, come writer called Prafulla Das. He undertook to translate all the Nobel laureates, and the Nobel laureates themselves contributed original materials in the form of forewords and prefaces and introductions to these Oriya books. And you'll be very happy to know that T.S. Eliot's Wasteland was the first Indian translation of T.S. Eliot's Wasteland in 1956 was an Oriya translation of T.S. Eliot's Wasteland. So this is just the background, just to alert you to the thriving, flourishing translation scene in Odisha. And I want to now shift the attention to the English language translation scene. In fact, I also identify 3 interesting phases of this translation, because from 1960 to 1990s, there was not much translation in Odisha. There were only 4 or 5 translations, some iconic works like Paraja, like by Gopinath Mahanti, the iconic novel Chhaman Atagund, which Professor Satpathy mentioned earlier, that was translated 3 times between in 1967. And then Kalindi Charan Panigrahi's Matira Manisa, son of the born of the soil, that was translated in 73. But there was not much, and the translation as an act, as a very important bicultural act, which involves some consciousness of the craft, skill, was not, at all important in Odisha at that time. So such awareness, this awareness of translation is a very conscious act, came to Orissa in 1995, after 1995, and why? Two outside forces played a very significant role in this. In 1995, as you know, Mini Krishnan, who was supposed to be present here, but she could not come, she started this Macmillan India uh, project, novels in English translation series in Chennai. And as part of that project, several titles, at least 5 titles in every language, every major Indian language, were selected for translation. In Odisha, 3 novels were published. One is Gopinath Mohanty's Danapani, which was translated as Survivor by Vikram Das. The second one is Manoj Das's Akasar Isara, translated as The Escapist. And the third is Kaneshwara Mishra's Sakalar Moho, translated as Face of the Morning. This is when translation suddenly became it became a more visible activity, and it was possible on the part of what I would call laity, the common man, to consider himself or herself capable of being a translator. Earlier, it was in the hands of some gifted individuals. For example, one of the earliest translations of a iconic Oriya poem called Baji Raut was translated by Harindranath Chattopadhyay in 1954. But then after this happened, Mini Krishnan's experiment, and coupled with that, another major experiment instituted by Geeta Dharmarajan in Delhi called the Katha Prize Stories saw 2 Oriya translators and their authors win the Katha Prize Award, one in 97, the other in 95, the second one in 97. So these 2 activities pumped a lot of energy into the Oriya English language translation scene, and there was what we witnessed, what is called a renaissance of translation, and this was mostly driven by the local publishing industry in Odisha. I'll mention in particular 3 publishing houses, very local publishing houses. One is called Grassroots, which was born in the year 2000. The other is called Rupantar, born in 2005, and another in between 2003 or 2 or 3, Prafullo. Now, Grassroots and Rupantar, and as you know, Rupantar is one of the several Indian words for translation. Anubad, Anusrujan, Bhasantar, Rupantar, Kathantar. So they were completely into translation. And they were very active in the scene. For about 10 or 15 years, they remained active. And a bumper harvest of translation was reaped during that time. Grassroots, 57 titles. Rupantar, 31 titles. Prafullo, 2 titles. But Prafullo took the lead in publishing the first major translated volume of translated stories, The Anatomy of Madness, which was very influential. So this I would call the phase of revolution in Orissa, 2005 to 2015. And all the canonical literature, mostly fiction and short fiction, was translated during this time. And that led to what I would call a phase of consolidation. This is when translation did not need to be apologized for. And a very wide base of translators had been created, and they were able to translate freely and at will. So a lot more happened in the translation field. I'll just give you one example. In January 2020, a writer called Priyanka Lindgren published an article in Huffington Post, and she mentioned 8 titles, Oriya titles in English translation, as must reads. 8. What are these titles? I'll just read it out. 6 Acres and a Third, Fakir Mohan Senapati, Penguin, 2006. Paraja, Gopinath Mohanty, OUP, 1987. 1000 Days in a Refrigerator, original writer Manoj Panda. Speaking Tiger, 2016. Spark of Light, a collection of short stories by Oriya women writers by Valerie Hanityuk and Supriya Kar, Bheda, the first Dalit novel in Oriya by late Akhil Naik, translated by Rajkumar, Basanti, the novel that I translated with Paul St. Pierre, Oxford University Press 2019, The Greatest Oriya Stories Ever Told, translated by Himansu Mohapatra, Paul St. Pierre, and K.K. Mohapatra. The eighth work is Colors of Loneliness, a collection of short stories by Paramita Satpathy, translated by Snehaprabha Das. So these 8 titles were published during a 20-year period. But actually, if you look at the other titles which they could not mention, the list would be at least 3 times as long. The number is 3 times more. Now, if you compare that with what happened in the 20-year period from 1980 to 2000, you'll find that only 6 works were translated. So, this period of consolidation saw a huge number of translations, and translations published by reputed national publishers. Now, we come to this third phase. The current phase is one of proliferation, but then what Professor Anisur Rahman was telling yesterday, it's a very random, very random decision to translate whatever is there. Any writer who has published, one book of short stories or one book of poems, he asks someone to translate, and he translates, or he or she translates it. So this is a kind of proliferation. There is a huge, number of titles produced, but then without any clear design, any clear plan in how to translate. And these titles have languished in a readerless, reviewerless world. They have not been reviewed anywhere. So this period of proliferation is also one of dissipation. And we are now suffering from too much of translation rather than, as we were suffocating earlier, from too little of it in the 1960s, from the 1960s to 80s. Now, how much time do I have? Okay. I'll quickly draw the lessons from this coming of age of this Oriya translation field. The lessons are that in Odisha, Odisha is, presents a very peculiar case study. You'll find that some authors are being translated again and again, and they people from outside Orissa know these authors because they are translated very frequently. And one is Chaman Athagund. It has seen 6 translations till date. The first 3 in 1967, first 2 in 1967, the third one in 69, the fourth one in 2005, and that was published by University of California Press. And the last one was published in 2021 by LF. So, Fakir Mohan, next to Fakir Mohan, it is Gopinath Mahanti. Almost 6 of his novels have been translated, and of course, only once, followed by Karendi Charan Panigrahi, and then of course, J.P. Das, Jagannath Prasad Das, and Pratibha Rai. So these are the iconic works that people outside Odisha know. Likewise, the translators known outside Odisha, translators that Odisha is known by, are only a handful. Vikram K. Das, Jatindra Kumar Naik, and Snehaprabha Das, Leelapati, K.K. Mohapatra, and Paul St. Pierre. So these are the people that Odisha is known by. The problem is that the literary canon of Odisha and the translation canon have tended to diverge. The translation canon doesn't actually follow the historical evolution of Oriya literature. So many major writers like Surendra Mahanti or Kanhucharan Mahanti, the elder brother of Gopinath Mahanti, have not been translated. They are being translated now, but again they are published by very obscure local publishing houses who do not bring any rigor to the translation. So these are some of the things that are happening in the translation scene in Odisha. So I'll just conclude by with this. in this third phase, English language translation activity, Oriya titles have proliferated. Theoretical considerations pertaining to translation, such as whether to translate towards the reader or towards the text or towards a combination of both, are largely disregarded. Meanwhile, translations published from the big publishing houses continue to define the benchmark of good translation. Sadly, they also become the prisms through which only the tip of Oriya literature is visible in the national and international arena, resulting in the invisibility of its submerged depth and diversity. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Mohapatra, for this very insightful talk, in which you made one very important point, which is translation allows us to re engage with texts that we assume we are familiar with. So, translation is also a kind of defamiliarizing process in which a text you assumed you are familiar with becomes unfamiliar, and then you refamiliarize yourself. So, this defamiliarization and refamiliarization process happens through the process of translation. And Professor Mohapatra is an academic, a professor, and naturally his talk was a very erudite kind of overview of Oriya literature and translation scenario. And he has traced the trajectory right from the colonial time to to the proliferation of translation in the first half of 20th century that happened across India, not just in Oriya but also in other languages. Then post 1950, when Oriya suffered a bit of a lull in translation scenario, and then again the proliferation that he has talked about, and then he talks about the current proliferation, where he says that there is no scheme as such. Everyone is translating, and whoever gets to publish gets published. So probably this madness that has been unleashed, there will be some method to it which will emerge in the due process. We now move on to Nadeem Khan Sahab, and translators are not necessarily academics. Some do translation by vocation, by choice, and Nadeem Khan Sahab is one such translator. He retired as teacher of English in 2010. He was the founder director of Western Regional Center of the Indian Institute of Mass Communication from 2011 to 2018. Starting from 2011, he has translated well over a couple of dozen books from Marathi into English. He has also translated from Hindi into English and English into Hindi. His notable translations have been Vishwas Patil's Panipat and volumes 1 and 2 of Shivaji Quartet, published by Westland, Savita Ambedkar's autobiography and Lokmanya Tilak's Kesari articles, published by Penguin. He won the Value of Words 2020 award for Avadhut Dongare's The Story of Being Useless, which was published by Ratna Books. He has also figured in the long list of JCB Awards and Crosswords Awards of 2025. And during our conversation, he told me something very interesting. I don't know whether I can share or not. Okay, I'm not. Okay, over to you.
चंद्रा जी, अदनान की चरिता जो मैंने सीक्रेट अभी थोड़ी देर पहले निशात आपस से शेयर की, वो शायद आपको पहले पता होती तो शायद मैं यहाँ बैठा भी ना होता। इत्तेफाक ऐसा है, यहाँ पे बहुत सारे ट्रांसलेशन के स्टूडेंट्स बैठे हैं, करेक्ट? या प्लीज हैव अ वेरी केयरफुल लुक एट मी. आई एम द यूनिकॉर्न इन द गार्डन, right? I don't know where to place myself. In the first place, look, I've been a teacher of English, but really I taught English in a science college, all right? And that too BSc Part 1. So there was no teaching of literature as such. I mean, I do admit that I did read a little bit of literature when I was a student, and I was never a very good student, I promise you. Never a very good student, either at the undergraduate level or the postgraduate level. So I just stumbled on and passed and passed. I remember a very nice saying. It says that people who can do. People who can't become teachers. And people who can't even teach become teachers. Yeah, so well, that has been my. I mean, the best I can say is that I'm a bit of a rolling stone, and I have neither gathered moss nor lost much of my moss. So, but anyway, so as a teacher of English, I really haven't taught literature. I mean, I've been a reader. That's another thing. So I didn't need to be a teacher of English for that. Everybody else is a teacher of English. I mean, a reader of English. So that was one great qualification for being a translator of English. Okay, I mean, not that I never taught literature. The other strange secret that I just disclosed to Nishat Appa is that I have written around 27 or not written, translated from Marathi into English. I've translated something like 27, 28 Marathi books into English. And Chandra, if you ask me how many books have I read in Marathi, that is the exact number that I have read. I mean, I deserve to be stoned out. And as I said, I am the unicorn in the garden. I the funny thing is that even the Marathi books that I read during my pre-translation days, I read them in translations into English. Yeah, there is this very famous novel by V.S. Khandekar, is a very important Marathi author. He has written a landmark book called Yayati, and I read that in the English translation because I didn't have the guts or perhaps even the qualifications or the whatever to get into the Marathi book. The other very famous Marathi dramatist Vijay Tendulkar, I have read him exclusively and only in translations into English. So you see how wonderfully I become qualified to become a translator, which is why all of you young people should look at me very carefully and and know that there can always be oddballs in this game of translation. And all this, since yesterday, I have been listening to the history, the geography, the sociology of translation, and all of it has pretty much gone over my head. All that I have known is the chemistry of translation. I just thought that I was pretty decent at English. I've done, I mean, like all of us, we've been good readers, and Marathi I absorbed from my environment. Okay, now I was a teacher of English teaching to Marathi speaking students, but it turns out that they were far better teachers than I was, and perhaps I was a far better learner than they were. So I didn't manage to teach them much English, but they did manage to teach me sufficient enough Marathi to understand what was going around in the world. So, yeah, the dirty secret is that the very first book that I read in Marathi was the one that I was required to translate. It happens that a friend of mine, Kirti Ramchandran, who's also a friend who has some friends here too, she was a little overloaded with work. And I met her at a certain place and she said, Nadeem, translation karta kya? I said, यार translation कभी इतना थोड़ा बहुत किया था. I'll give you this little. I mean, ये शौक के लिए क्या करता था यार, for a laugh. I mean, just to impress my friends कि मैं अंग्रेजी का, हिंदी का, उर्दू का जानकार हूँ. Therefore, kindly get impressed. I mean, this was why I did it. See, there is this very famous rubai translated by Edward Fitzgerald into English, and it goes like this. I'm sure you would have heard it. Ah, make the most of what you yet may spend. Ah, make the most of what you yet may spend before you too into the dust descend. Dust unto dust, and under dust to lie, sans wine, sans song, sans singer, and sans end. ओके, तो दोस्तों को इम्प्रेस करना था, तो मैंने यार चलो मैं इसको हिंदी में करके दिखाता हूँ. तो द वे इट वेंट वाज, जो कुछ है यहाँ तू उसका जश्न मनाता चल. मेक द मोस्ट ऑफ व्हाट यू येट मिस पेन. जो कुछ है यहाँ तू इसका जश्न मनाता चल, मिट्टी में उतारे जाने के इस ओर. जो कुछ है यहाँ तू इसका जश्न मनाता चल, मिट्टी में उतारे जाने के इस ओर. मिट्टी से मिट्टी मिलकर फिर सो जाएगी. बिन गीत वो गायक, बिन मदिरा और बिन भोर. So I just did it for a lark. I don't know how. I'm sure many of you would be familiar with this iconic nonsensical poem, Lewis Carroll, "The Walrus and the Carpenter." Have you children? Have you read it? I do recommend very strongly that you go home and instantly go into Google and look for The Walrus and the Carpenter, Lewis Carroll. It is a part of Alice in Through the Looking Glass. So it was a terrific thing, terrific thing. It was a nonsensical poem, and I thought, okay, I'm nonsensical enough to try my hand at it. So it goes like this, you know. The sun was shining on the sea, shining with all his might. And he did his very best to make the billows smooth and bright. And this was odd because it was the middle of the night. Okay? तो इसका मैंने मुझे सनक पड़ी तो मैंने शुरू कर दिया. चमक रहा था सूरज देखो लगा के पूरा दम, और कोशिश थी कि कर दे सारी लहरों को चमचम. पर बात अजब थी क्योंकि आधी रात थी हुई खत्म. And the moon was shining sulkily because she thought the sun had got no business to be there after the day was done. It's very rude of him, he said, to come and spoil the fun. तो चांद ने चिड़चिड़ लगा रखी थी सूरज के छाने पर. क्यों है अब तक टंगा हुआ ये दिन के ढल जाने पर. बदतमीज को मजा है आता मजा किरकिराने पर. तो ये इस तरह की सिलसिला होता रहा और मैं शौक के लिए करता रहा. और फिर मुझे इत्तेफाक से कीर्ति रामचंद्र ने एक जिम्मा टिका दिया और मुझे लगा ये काफ़ी अच्छा है और चल गई. That was the first Marathi book I got, and then Vishwas Patil was the gentleman who risked his reputation by trusting me. And then after this first book, he gave me another book, and that turned out to be a haymaker. उनकी बहुत मशहूर किताब है पानीपत. पानीपत को कई ज़बानों में उसका तर्जुमा किया गया है, हर ज़बान में किया गया है, और अंग्रेज़ी में मुझे करने का मौका मिला. ये दिस मस्ट हैव बीन, Raja, when did your daughter get married? Which year? 2011, yeah. So that was around the time that this book came to me, and well, I mean, I managed, okay. So that was the second book. And then a third book came along, and then my friends, Sridhar and Dinesh of Ratna Books, I met them somewhere and I told them, look, there is this book that I have done of a young chap, a budding Marathi author by name Avdut Dongre. He was terrific. And he had written a couple of books. One of them, मैं मराठी में उसका टाइटल बताता हूँ, स्वतःला फालतू समजण्याची गोष्ट. The story of considering oneself as useless. And the other novel was एका लेखकाचे 3 संदर्भ, the 3 contexts of a writer. So that boy, for some reason, perhaps he got impressed by my hairstyle. So he came along and said, "Ke ye bhi kijiye." It was lovely. I did it for the love of it because he was such a terrific man. And then it just happened that Dinesh and I ran into each other, and I narrated the story, and he again thought that, okay, ठीक ठाक है. So I sent over the draft to him, and it went on to do reasonably well, and it got me the Value of Words award. So ठीक है, I mean, I'm the ajuba, I'm the unicorn, right? तो ये जो सारा जो pedagogy है जो मैं सुन रहा था, I'm very sure it is very very important. You know, this is how ultimately knowledge branches out into various areas of study. तो लेकिन मुझे ये कभी समझी नहीं, और इत्तेफाक ऐसा था, चंद्रा, आई टेल यू दिस, कि मुझे लगा कि मैं बहुत बड़ी एक्चुअली बहुत ही स्कॉलर्स के बीच में जाके मैं ट्रांसलेशन के बारे में बात करने वाला हूं, तो थोड़ा पेडागोजी को जान लूं. आई प्रॉमिस यू, मुझे कुछ भी नहीं समझा. I really didn't know, nothing ever stuck in my head. I simply didn't know what they were talking about, and I'm bloody happy that I didn't join as a learner, you know, because I would have failed for certain. So yeah, this has been the joke. So it's nice that I am more or less coming towards the end as a bit of a freak. ना तो लिटरेचर जानने वाला अंग्रेजी में, ना मराठी की जानकारी रखने वाला, लेकिन नसीब ऐसा है यार, 27-28 किताबें हो गई और मामला ठीक ही चल रहा है. तो ये कुल मिलाकर के आई हैव गॉन बाय गट्स, व्हाट मे बी कॉल्ड कॉमन सेंस. तो अब मैं आपको एक छोटा सा जो मैंने ट्रांसलेशन किया है, this is a book called Leaf, Water and Flow, again by Avadhut Dongre, and this has again been published by Ratna Publications, and it made it to the long list of JCB, yeah, JCB के लॉन्ग लिस्ट में पहुंची थी. तो ये जो मैं ट्रांसलेशन आपको करके बता रहा हूं, दिस मोर और लेस exemplifies what kinds of walls I was running into as a translator, and how I managed to escape before one of those walls fell upon me. So, तो ये ऐसा है कि ये this story, the narrator is doing the rounds of Gadchiroli and the Nakshal affected areas. He meets a woman who was formerly a member of the Dalam. The Dalams were the squads, you know, who stood against the police and fought for the destitutes. So right, this woman is telling the narrator, she's a Gond, and this is how I have tried it. How you write my story now, huh? I only know Gondi, you only know Marathi, my Hindi not good, your Hindi not good also. So how we do? I only tell you, and you only I from that village. My man also from that village. My name, Lattakka. I see this jeep, this building, first time. FUST. There in village, when sound of jeep come there na, that time police come. So, police come. Jeep come mean police come. Look, government say make road for development, but why we let road come in our village? Not let. Jeep will come on road. Jeep mean police. So, you want to make road for police? How this will do, Dada? Okay. Now, you tell me, this will do? To my brother, this police mm, this big rope. So they hang my brother by this big rope, put him backside of jeep on ground, and run jeep fast. So sometime tree, sometime big stone. So like this, they kill my brother. Now 7 year I keep in jail. I keep in jail. Why? My man also keep in jail. So many people keep in jail. Why? I now here, live here. My man work like guard in that building, like security guard. We not return back to village now. People ask, why you help the other people? See, they help to us. So for that reason, we help to them. Who help us in good time, what we do with them? Who help us in bad time, we can do to help them. Huh? If you do help to us in bad time, I can take you as brother. Nah? Who help us in good time, we cannot remember also. The other people come to our village, I see them from child time, then going with them, eating, they eating with us, then telling, Didi people telling, you woman people also stand by side of man. Man people go out and talk other woman, why you not talk to other man? Okay. Why like this? Didi people say like this, then every people think, then we will support them. Okay. Then the other people tell us, pick up gun. So we can have to pick up, na? If front people have gun, so we also can have gun. If Dada people give us gun, how it is bad? No anything bad in that. Now, if this ambush happen, so then kill some police people. Who will fire bullet first? He will live. Who will not fire? He will die. It happened like this. 10 people sitting in jeep, they go up in one single time with one bomb. People should be together. Then they go up together. In jeep will always happen like this. Now look, for to stay living, you can have to stay together, and people also die together. Today also to die, tomorrow also to die. We all die. But our children at least live then. So we can have to die for our children. Dada, you write this. That's it. So, well, I don't know. I mean, just this piece reading out, I suppose it spells out the kinds of problems that you run into and how you find your way out. It like this, it come to me, I do it, so there you are. Thank you very much. This is about all that I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Nadeem Saab. That was fascinating. As they say that you can learn 100 rules of swimming, but you can't learn swimming unless and until you jump into water. So also with translation, you can learn all theories of translation and still be a bad translator. So, to be a good translator, you don't need to learn translation theory. You just need to have that instinct for language and the life world that the translation, that the literary text embodies. So now we move on to Professor Sachin C. Ketkar. He is also an academic, and I would request him to stick to 10 to 15 minutes maximum. um, he's a bilingual writer, translator, and academician. His most recent book is Venkatesh Madgulkar, A Village Full of Stories and A Forest Full of Tales, which was done for Writer in Context series. The editor is here. Both the editors actually are here. Um, Ratland India 2023, co-edited with Kirti Ramchandran. His poetry collections are Skin, Spam and Other, Fake Encounters, Selected Marathi Poems in Translation, and the list is long. So can you please skip the list? He won Indian Literature Poetry Translation Prize for translation of Gujarati poetry in 2000, given by Indian Literary Journal, uh, Indian Literature, Sahitya Academy Journal. Then Loknete Raja Ram Bapu Patil, Maharashtra Lalit Kala Academy, Islampur, for contribution to translation. His books on criticism have been published. One is called Janglia Kavite Varchi Statutory Warning, Samakalin Marathi Kavita, in Marathi, and it was published in translation also, Migrating Words, Refractions on Indian Translation Studies in 2010. He currently he is a professor of English at Maharaja Sanjeev Rao Maharaja Sayaji Rao University of Baroda, Vadodara, Gujarat. His forthcoming books are A Critical History of Marathi Literature and Dilip Chitre, Makers of Indian Literature. So he's doing a monograph for Indian for the Sahitya Academy. Yeah, over to you.
Uh, Thank you, Nishat ji. So at the outset, I would like to thank Chandrachari ji for having me here in the august company of some of the best translators and writers in India. So it's a privilege being here. So I want to thank you for that. And and to be with panel with likes of Professor Devy and Professor Sukrita and all that, that is overwhelming for me at one point. So I thank you for this honor. What I'm going to do today, and I'm going to try to stick to the time limit of 10 minutes, is that I'm going to reflect upon certain larger context of uh, our translation practice, and rather than speak about specific things that or specific practice and text. So I begin by asking questions to myself that have we been celebrating our multilingualism too much out of national pride or what have you? Is this celebration of also the explosive growth of Indian writing and English translation that we have seen in past 3 decades actually masking something, a crisis in Indian linguistic ecosystem produced by colonialism and globalization? These are the questions that bother me. I'm also asking whether our stories of multilingualism aren't they those of multiple displacements at multiple levels? And aren't these also the stories of fragmentation? So when we are celebrating, we are taking pride that we are multilingual, are we trying to hide something underneath it? So I just take a very brief overview of my own life as a multilingual writer, not as an exemplary case, but a kind of banal journey that many of us may have gone through as well. So I am a Marathi speaking person who is born and brought up in Gujarat, in Gujarati environment. Parents are from Maharashtra. And I am educated in a so-called English medium school, uh, and also in the profession of English education. And though I studied Hindi, Gujarati, English in schools and colleges, I picked up Marathi as a way of literary expression only on the way somewhere, thanks to great influence of Professor Ganesh Devy, with whom I am sharing this stage, on me at a very formative stage of my life. And he suggested that I should try my hand in writing in Marathi, and also
try my hand at translating because I showed him some of my translations. So if there is some damage, multilingual damage that is done because of me, now you know who to blame, actually. Uh, but I tried to translate from English to Hindi to start with, because these are the languages that I was more comfortable with in those days compared to Marathi, because I never formally studied Marathi, though most of my writings today are in Marathi, including in criticism. So formally, I am educated in Gujarati, Hindi, and English. So these are the languages that I was educated in. I turned to translation during my college. I attempted translating none other than Sri Aurobindo into Hindi, something that I find hilarious today. I would never even dream of such a task, but then when you are young, you can do reckless things. And again, I remember showing it to Professor Devy. And I turned to Narsi Mehta for translation for my doctoral research from Gujarati. So since then, I'm doing these things repeatedly for translating from Gujarati and translating from Marathi into English. However, when it comes to translating back into from English to Marathi or from Gujarati to Marathi, I don't do it. So I asked myself that what kind of multilingual situation is this? So ability to use multiple language is one thing, and ability to translate from them is something else, is what I discovered. So I translate more easily into English than between the bhashas. I ask myself, and I don't have a convincing answer, that why is it that I didn't translate from Marathi to Gujarati, which is almost like my other mother tongue, or from Hindi to Gujarati, or from Marathi to Hindi. Why I'm not doing all these things while I translate mostly into English. Uh, so, so this shows that probably multilingualism in India is an uneven and asymmetrical fact. It doesn't mean that all the languages that we use are kind of having existing equally for us. There is some sort of asymmetry between our multilingualism in terms of competencies of using language, or even competencies of translating, which is not the same, in spite of very often people asserting that we are all translators and all that. So multilingualism seems to also be a dynamic configuration, and in a sense, because it changes with our own location and our own histories. So as somebody who had never studied Marathi formally, I moved into Marathi because I found greater satisfaction. And even now I feel that unless I am able to write this in Marathi, I have not really understood whatever I'm trying to say. And that gives me the feeling of being, yes, now I know what I'm trying to say, even if I say that in English. This brings me to a problematic of English in India. And this is not something that is discussed over 2 days. And there are two important theoretical ideas, and I know there is certain kind of dislike towards theory, especially in translation, but I feel that is extremely powerful domain, and I think all the translators should read translation theory. And I'm saying this because if you are not reading theory, then you are already using a theory which can be very, very unproductive. And that theory is that translation is about equivalence. So we keep on asking, what is an equivalent to samadhi or Brahma or Dharma? So we are still looking at translation as if it is equivalent. And what are the equivalents to Dharma in the same language? So unless we engage with translation theory, I feel that you will be caught in a conventional theory of translation, which is using you already. The two theoretical ideas that I will speak and I will stop. One is given by Lambert, Wallace Lambert, one of the founding fathers of bilingualism. And he talks about something called subtractive bilingualism versus additive one. And it so happens that all of us who are Anglo-Bhasha bilinguals are living in this subtractive bilingual situation where our acquisition of English has created a disjuncture and disconnect with the regional and the mother tongues that we have been using. And so acquisition of English doesn't really add to our linguistic repertoire, but actually depletes our existing linguistic resources. And that happens, as Lambert points out, in a migrant situation. So when I move from Maharashtra to Gujarat, it is obvious that I'm living in a Gujarati environment, my Marathi will start declining. But what happens when you enter an English medium school is that without getting into displacement, physical displacement, the displacement begins, where your own mother tongue competencies start depleting. So this subtractive bilingual situation that we find ourselves in as Indians, especially in relation to English, but it can be between any languages, results in our desire to overcome this disjuncture between ourselves. And that leads us to translation most of the time. So though we glorify translation, we are actually trying to remedy a wound within ourselves. Translation becomes an attempt to overcome this subtractivity. Anglocentrism in all the discussion for 2 days is a problem that we don't really discuss much. The same problems that we face while translating into English, कि समाधि का क्या equivalent है, और धर्म क्या, won't be there if I'm translating from Gujarati to Marathi, or Marathi to Gujarati. So this agonizing feeling that I don't find equivalents in the language into which I translate would not exist if I shift my focus away from English in India. So maybe I am on a different terrain if I'm translating from Hindi to Gujarati or from Gujarati to Marathi compared to English. So in order to think about translation, we have to probably keep English out of the situation to understand probably the dynamics of translation that we need to develop. The second thing that happens because of this bilingual situation is that one ends up translating into second language or your third language, namely English, which is going against the logic of translation itself. It hardly happens that people translate into their second or third language. Most of the great translational work that we have seen, the world literary classics, are happening in their mother tongue. You read Neruda, but the translator is not translating into their second language. They are translating into the first language. So a certain crisis appear where we are unable to use linguistic resources of English because it's not our first language. It's not the language of our cultural reality as much as other languages are. So our English will invariably be academic, flat, and linear. Most of the problems underlying the so-called problems of translation that we have been discussing, especially our nationalist problem, that how to translate our awesome cultural wealth into impoverished language like English, indicates another fault line of English in India, something marked as linguistic schizophrenia by Braj Kachru. That on the one hand, our nationalism desires that we should not have English. It's a language of colonizers, that awareness is. It's a language of Western culture, which we are not happy with most of the time. On the other hand, we need English. So this contradictory desire is the sign of fragmentation that Braj Kachru is talking about when it comes to English. So even if I'm translating a Gujarati text into English, my English translation will be judged on the basis of the native speaker idiom, if you want to put it that way. It also gives rise to the desire in part of Bhasha writers to get translated into English as a marker of visibility, or they have now succeeded in recognition, especially the awards that recently are being given. Now there would be an increased desire for people in non-English literary cultures to get themselves translated into English. That is on increase. So this linguistic schizophrenia works together with subtractive bilingualism, creates certain kind of crisis and problems that affect us as translators and especially into English. And so if you want to come up with satisfactory framework for studying English or doing translation, maybe we would like to go beyond the position of English in India and explore far richer, greater traditions like Bangla or Marathi or Punjabi or Tamil, to look for models and resources or idioms or metaphors to build translation theory. Uh, so the last point that I want to make is then we need to redefine translation itself. If equivalence is not possible at any situation in any language, then what would translation be if it is not about equivalence? Then certain theorists like Jacobson, very famously, and later William Frawley, have defined translation as recodification or interpretative act, semiotic interpretation or recodification, which I find a better model. So Ram Ram can be translated as good morning, though there is no equivalence. So translation happens even if there is no equivalence. And that is what Frawley has been trying to demonstrate. So hence the need for theory, because theory is a critical reflection about the basics of what we are doing. And we are not always the best to understand what we are doing. So it's always a good idea to look up people who have thought long and deeply about these issues. And hence any allergy or hostility to theory, I feel, can be detrimental to our own practice and understanding of translation. And one last statement that I want to make is, why are we still discussing the translation as a process? With growth of Indian literature in English translation, which is explosive, we have to develop a framework for reading and studying translations rather than how to deal with them, how to translate a particular phrase or an idiom or a belief. How are we going to study Premchand in translation in Tamil Nadu? For me, that is more interesting question than just talking about our on and on about our process-based view of translation. So this is where I want to stop. Again, I want to thank the organizers for having me here, and I would be happy to respond and also learn from your observations. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Ketkar, for raising some important issues like the question of multilingualism, uh, the problem of Anglo-centric approach that we mostly have in academia whenever we discuss translation. I think these are pertinent questions that we must discuss in detail. Um, Now, as per the schedule, I should be going to Professor Devy, but I would use my chair's prerogative and I would invite Dr. Mangalam first to sum up the scenes from South India, translation scene in South India, and then we would come to Professor Devy at the end. Yeah. So let me introduce Dr. B. Mangalam. She is a professor in the Department of English, Aryabhatta College, Delhi University. She has been teaching since 1985. She translates from Hindi and Tamil to English. She has worked extensively on the intersectionality of caste and gender in literary discourse. Her recent publications include Dalit Fiction in Tamil, 1989 to 2022, Representation of Dalit Women, Worldview, 2023, Dalit Writings and Introduction, that was again published by Worldview, 2024. Apart from her translation of poetry and short stories from Tamil and Hindi to English, she has also translated Sharan Kumar Limbale's novel Bahujan as Bahujan An Awakening, which was published by Havakkal 2024. Her translation of Indira Parthasarthi's Tamil play Mazai as Barish in Hindi has been performed by professional theatre groups in Delhi and Mumbai. She has also written original plays in Hindi that have been performed by student theatre groups in Delhi University. She has edited critical volumes of Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice, Milton's Paradise Lost, Jean Genet's The Balcony, and Shilapadikaram. Over to you, Dr. Mangalam.
Well, thanks, Nishat, but not thanks for the googly. I was not prepared at all. I was looking forward to hearing Professor Devy, and this is really making me more nervous to speak, ahead of him. And thank you, Chandra, also. Mine, I was told to talk about all the southern languages, South Indian languages, as is put here. I'm not an expert. I can speak and read and translate only in Tamil. Malayalam, I understand a bit, but I don't read Malayalam, Telugu, or Kannadam. So therefore, I will just try to give an academic kind of a survey about what is happening amongst these languages and also from these languages to English. I'll just make six quick points, and then if time permits, I will elaborate. So first to look at what is happening amongst the Dravidian languages, one. Second, into English and also other foreign languages, how are they managing? And the third, this is my major, what should I say, thrust, the political intent behind these translations, and the role of small publishers and journals in southern languages, and role of publishing giants like in English, like the Penguin, OUP, Routledge, Bloomsbury, Peter Lang, etc., what they are doing, how they are, in a way, commodifying to some extent, and also, facilitating translation. So that's a tricky, problematic thing that I would like to address. And finally, the role of the state government. So to start with the role of the state government, in Tamil Nadu especially, the government-backed initiatives in collaboration with well-known publishers, but also with the government of India, has been, had started way back in late 1980s. And primarily, I would like to focus in terms of Ambedkar's writings being translated into Tamil from Marathi by the ministry, and this was published by a private publishing house, New Century Book House. This happened in 1999, 1989, a very significant year, because that was a year when Dalit movement in Tamil literature began to really blossom. And we have the first Dalit novel from Tamil in 1989, the same year, followed by Vama's Karku and Imayam's books from 1992, 94, etc. And in 1999, 10 years later, we also have the Tamil Nadu Textbook and Educational Services Corporation, which was started, and now it has initiated a very significant project. And this January, the book review has been, solely devoting to these productions, and some of them have been done earlier, but the recent ones, they have initiated a very huge project, which is really very heartening, because we do need state support in translation work. And much of it is on translation, not only about Dalit writers, but also early Sangam period classics, as well as well-known fiction writers, women writers as well as canonical writers. I would now like to briefly talk about the various small, almost unknown publishers. Some of them have shut down, unfortunately, and they have contributed very significantly in terms of the translation work from amongst the Indian languages, from Marathi to Tamil, from Gujarati to Tamil, from Kannada, and from Malayalam, and vice versa. Unfortunately, the reverse process, I don't notice much. Maybe Vasanta ma'am can tell us. But I still feel from my readings and research that Tamil has been more open in terms of translating from other languages, especially from Kannada and from Malayalam to a large extent, and also from Marathi, interestingly, especially the Dalit autobiographical narratives were translated by a very small, hardly known publisher, Vidiyal Padipikam, in the 1990s, in the early 2000s also. When I began my research on Dalit writings, I solely depended on Vidiyal Padipikam. I couldn't get the Marathi translations much in Hindi, which is another language that I could read. And at that time, I didn't trust the English translation, so I chose to read the, Lakshman Mane, or the other Kishore Shantabai Kale, and later Baby Kamble in Tamil first. And I found them as, very helpful translations. And even Aravinda Malagatti, well-known Kannada writer, I could read in Tamil more easily. And Pavarnan also had translated lots of Kannada short stories into Tamil, both Dalit stories and non-Dalit stories. Vidiyal also published, along with Vidiyal and Ideas, they published Bama's novels and, Mark's autobiography. And all this happened in the 1990s, 92, 94, 98. And Topil Muhammad Miran again was translated around this time between 1995 and 2001 from Malayalam by Jalila Publishing House. There are smaller publications in Tamil like Uyirmai, and of course, Kalachuri is quite a well-known, very committed publisher, but it also started as a very small publishing house initially. Now, of course, it has become a very major publishing house, unlike Kriya, which again is a very major publishing house. And these also have focused on, largely on original writings by Dalit writers, by women writers, by Muslim women writers writing in Tamil, to focus on that register, which is also equally important of the mainstream literature. And they have published in various genres. It's not that I'm focusing only on Dalit writings, because that is one domain I'm more, familiar with. But there are other, what should I say, kind of translations that have been happening, but the Dalit literature has been most robustly translated amongst the, amongst the South Indian languages, and that I think is a very, very important political intent of the translation projects taken up largely by the smaller publishing houses, because the intent seems to be dissemination of content. So they are not really talking in terms of what we are discussing, which is of course very essential, but the intent is to disseminate as widely and as quickly as possible. And also the dissemination is not only about the content but also about the literary movement. So there is a sense of commitment, and so there is a kind of very vigorous what should I say, effort to arrive at solidarities among these writers and also among the readers. And Tamil and Malayalam are very compatible in terms of the reception. Much of what is written in Malayalam gets very quickly translated to Tamil. The Malayalam films are very popular, so even at the popular level, it helps. The reverse, as I said, I noticed in terms of certain Tamil writers, for instance, Abhilash, who is a young contemporary modern writer. He uses a particular register, which is the Kanyakumari Tamil, which is very close to spoken Malayalam as well. But even his writings have not been translated into Malayalam. So I would like to certainly read more about it and also learn from those who can read these languages in the original to find out what is the publishing circuit, why that is not happening to such a rigorous level. Sukrita Rani, another very important voice among Dalit women writers, has been published in Bangla also. But that's again because of a single individual's initiative. A Tamil scholar studying in Kolkata University has translated her works into Bangla. So that is another way. Migration also helps in terms of people living outside Tamil Nadu. Recently, the writer Imiyam questioned this, that those who are staying or living, residing outside Tamil Nadu perhaps are not so keen, are not so alert to the spoken idiom, and so perhaps they make mistakes. And he, in a conversation with me last week, he told me certain specific examples of translations, how it is, if it is done by an upper caste. We were talking about positionality in the morning, so I'm bringing up this issue. If it is translated by an upper caste or by a person who is residing outside Tamil Nadu, there are more errors to be found. But this is also a recent response, not earlier, because initially in the 1990s and early 2000s, this was really not the matrix within which we worked. Because at that time, the Dalit writers found that there are not enough critical voices, critics, reviewers, or translators from the marginalized sections. So they were throwing it open, and also that initial writings were largely written in terms of evolving a conversation with the Savarna readers. So it worked out very well. So I don't know this particular kind of response from one of the well-known and very prolifically translated writers. He is a prolific writer himself, and each of his Tamil novel or collection gets translated into English within 6 months. So I asked him, do you prefer that your translation should happen to other languages? He said, yes, it does happen, but at a much slower pace. But in English, my books are translated. much faster. So in terms of hierarchies that we have been discussing, and I think Professor Ketkar, I fully agree with you that it's far more fulfilling for us to translate into another Indian language. And when I translate a play, I always make it a point to translate it into Hindi because it will get performed. If I translate into English, it is only for as an academic exercise. So those possibilities are there, but I have found that writers themselves prefer that their work should be translated into English. And the argument is that yes, and that's also a valid argument that through English, other regions, other languages also tend to translate. This also has been recently kind of questioned in terms of if you do not know the original language, how can you translate a text via English? And I think that the English by now, Indian English especially, has become a very important linked language. It has always been, but in terms of the translation, framework, English is a very helpful language in terms of, as I said, many of the Marathi autobiographies, Dalit autobiographies, had been translated via English as well. Some of them certainly, and two of them from through Hindi to Tamil. So the languages travel a lot, and I think it's useful to fall back on English translation in order to reach our other Indian languages. And if the writers prefer English translation because that gives them greater visibility, that gives them a global readership, and some of them also feel that through English, other foreign languages are also picked up. In the recent Chennai Book Fair, MOUs were signed for more than 30 books in as many languages, including Arabic, French, Malay, Albanian, Latvian, as well as in English. But the English translation, the MOUs were certainly far, far more in number. In terms of percentage, some around 30% of Tamil novels are immediately negotiated in terms of, to be translated into English language. And we also have had academic research intended translations in terms of, looking up for voices that were active during the nationalist movement, especially women. And also Periyar has been translated more recently in English, and as well as going back to Kurundagai or Thiruvalluvar or different some Kurundagai I mentioned. These are lyrics from Sangam corpus. Rajam Krishna's book works also have been translated in recent years. Another aspect that I have noticed is in English translations we have that seems to be a deliberate tilt towards nostalgia, towards towards catering to this hyper nationalism that's so popular these days, quote unquote. So historical novels have been revisited. Historical novels which were very popular when they were serialized and published in the 1940s, 1950s, like Kalki, for instance. Punniyin Selvan and Parthiban Kanavu and Sivagami and Savadam have been translated very well, of course, but they were very popular and still popular even among Tamil readers. So to translate them into English, Tamil readers are not going to read them, but certainly this does, as I said, fits in with the merging of the cultural popularity of text with the current obsession in terms of rebuilding nation through a nostalgic indulgence. So that also could be because these are published by well-known publishers, in English. In terms of literary anthologies in English translation, in all these languages, OEP has done a tremendous job in terms of bringing out the Dalit Oxford literary anthologies in English. In Tamil, it came out in 2012. In Malayalam also the same year, 2012. In Telugu in 2016, in two dossiers, and in 2011 and 2013. So these are very important contributions because each of these anthology contains more than 50 writers. Some of them are excerpts, but some of them are, complete short stories or long poems and other non-fiction also, memoirs, diary work, and, historical documentation during the nationalist struggle in terms of Dalit's contribution, in this field. So this has been, common to all the four languages. So I think much recent translations, I'm looking at the, late 1990s to 2020 or so. And this is the period when a majority of translation projects have been revolving around Dalit anthologies or Dalit texts and women's texts as well. Recently, Routledge also brought out, a volume on Bama writer as activist, and I found something very, interesting to share with all of you, that they had to retranslate the available translation already. Lakshmi Holmstrom, as we know, had done a good translation, and Mini Krishnan also was associated with her, and Bama was happy with those translations. But again, OUP held on to the copyright and did not give it to them. So when it comes to English publishing houses, money becomes a very crucial factor. Right? It should be, but as I mentioned, VDL or other, or even Ravi Kumar publishes, Neelam Publications is a very major, it makes very major interventions, both in popular cinema as well as in literary translations. They do not focus, they focus on the choice of text, and as I said, the political intent of dissemination of the content and the movement. But when it comes to the English, very well-established publishers like Routledge or OUP or Penguin, they go by, they wanted to get this retranslated. I had the opportunity, so I should be happy about it, but I'm not happy about it, because primarily they simply kind of, act as predatory publishers of Dalit texts in English, but they neither pay the writer nor pay the translator. Right? And also they are fighting among themselves in terms of the copyright issue. So I think that also has to be, someone has to raise this certainly. In Malayalam to Tamil and Malayalam to English, what I understand is contemporary literature, contemporary poetry, as well as fiction is translated more readily, because contemporary poetry, Sachidanandan also says in one interview, that is easier because it's not following a meter, and so it gets translated more readily and also to better kind of effect. The use of AI is used for translation into foreign languages, and I'm not the expert, so I wouldn't talk about the AI. But from Tamil to Hindi also, there are a few well-known translators. Penneswaran has translated Mantu recently last year, and Sharavanan has translated, now I think it's Nadar Kardan Sharavanan. He has translated Bhagat Singh's letters to Durga Babi from Hindi to Punjabi via Hindi to English. And maybe, I'm not sure whether Bhagat Singh wrote in Punjabi or Hindi in that particular thing. But Bhagat Singh letters to Durga Babi has been translated into Tamil recently. A lot of children's fiction also gets translated from these 4 southern languages into Hindi and vice versa. As I said, and both Imayam as well as Limbale, to whom I spoke to, and Bama, these 3 writers I spoke certainly in the context of today's presentation. And they said that we don't mind if our texts reach as many languages as possible, whether it reaches through English or amongst the languages, because multilingualism, though we not we can't celebrate perhaps Professor Ketkar, because it is falling is declining. And most people perhaps know English and one more language, but they don't study or read in that language. So primarily we are unfortunately moving towards monolingualism or bilingualism on the periphery. And so therefore there are very few, maybe from our generation, very few people who can read or write in more than 3 languages. And so therefore English, especially in terms of Indian English, as some translators choose to use, has become indispensable. As a kind of a link language. I'm raising this point again to counter what I heard in the previous symposium conducted by the book review, and this was objected to, that if you don't know the original language, and then you should not translate via English. I myself have translated Limbale's Bahujan. I don't know Marathi, but I translated it into English from Hindi. But I worked in close collaboration with the writer, so he kind of, corrected at a few places. He allowed me to make certain changes at few places. So collaborative translation is another, possibility with the writer. And most writers these days can at least understand English even if they don't read in English. So that is what I have to say, since I would rather, and all of us also would love to rather hear Professor Devy much more than what I have said. This was just a basic survey, because I don't translate in Malayalam, Telugu or Kannada, and I don't want to be I mean, no one can claim to know all the four languages in terms
Thank
of
you.
translation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mangalam. That was very comprehensive, even though you focused on one language, but that gives us a sense of how much we need to really know if the corpus of one language is so vast, and this is just a glimpse into that. So obviously, all four southern languages, it is much vaster than that. So thank you so much, and also for pointing out the importance of translating from Indian languages into from one Indian language to another Indian language, which is different from translation from Indian languages into English. And now we are going to turn to Professor G.N. Devi, for whom we have been waiting for so long. Professor Devi, I can really say this with confidence that he needs no introduction. He definitely needs no introduction, but still he has given a very brief bio note, which I will read out. He is a habitual cultural activist who stayed into building cultural institutions, occasionally writing in English, Marathi, and Gujarati, mostly unreadable books, and constantly editing works on anthropology, linguistics, philosophy, history, and some on literature. The most recent of his works is Citizen Under Siege, which is published in 2025, and is currently working on a book of political theory towards recovery of the lost democracy. He is resident in Dharwad in Karnataka, where he moved from Gujarat after returning his Sahitya Academy Award received in 1993. So this is a brief note that he asked me to read, but then we all know his work. And when we are talking about multilingualism, when we are talking about regional languages and regional languages, their relationship with English and their relationship with each other, who better speaker can we have than Professor Devi to throw light on these aspects? Over to you, Professor Devi.
चंद्रा जी, बहुत धन्यवाद। मैं दिल से आपको दुआ देना चाहता हूँ। बहुत अरसे के बाद मेरे लिए कोई ह्यूमनाइजिंग एक्सपीरियंस मैं यहाँ पा रहा हूँ। And I'll explain why I'm saying that. The first oral composition known to us in this subcontinent would be Rigveda. That's 1400 years before Christ, 3500 years before our time. Indians were lazy in learning scripts. While Syria had script, Greeks had developed script, China had started developing script. Indians started using script only in the 3rd century before Christ. That's 2400 years before. That is let's say 1100 years after the oral composition started coming down through memory in such a way that after 6 or 7 centuries, even those people who remembered how to recite did not remember the meaning of the thing. This is what Sri Aurobindo says, not me, in a book called Secret of Veda. And that's why this corpus went up in the esteem tremendously because nobody understood what it meant, like Shakespeare's English today. So, first script is 3rd century. Ashoka's edicts show the first script samples here. First book comes only after the script comes. While there are oral compositions, there are compositions which are remembered. But a book as a book, manuscripts of course, but in terms of paper, use of paper, and that's 12th century, 11th to 12th century. In Delhi, 12th century, during the 12th century, the richest people in Delhi were sellers of paper, traders of paper. They made huge amount of money on books. I envy them. We poor writers now. When does the first translation come up in India? And if you really scratch your brain, you can think of, say, the first Chinese translations of Buddhist canon, translations happening in China. I mean, in the Chinese language, even if those people came here, sat here and translated. Where is the first Indian translation? And that is from language, Indian language to another. Kathasarit Sagar would be a good example, which was written, composed in Paishachik, but then came into Sanskrit. Sanskrit branded it. Paishachik created it, Kathasarit Sagar, as a corpus of stories. The earliest respected translations were, of course, Mahabharata, I mean, in southern languages, Tamil, Kannada, Telugu, Mahabharata, and in Hindi, Ramayana, Tulsi Ramayana. In Marathi, some kind of rendition of Bhagavad Gita in an expanded form, that is Jnaneshwar's Jnaneshwari. And why did those translations emerge? That is to gain respectability for languages which were earlier seen as only Prakruts, only Apabhramshas, not pure languages. Tamil got into translation because Kannada was getting into translation. I mean, that credit goes to Kannada. Is exactly the parallel is Sanskrit started using writing script because Buddhist and Jain canons were getting written, and therefore Sanskritists decided to write down their books. Yeah, it happens when a new lecturer is appointed, a reader starts teaching better. Oh, hua. Translations to gain respectability. And that's precisely the history of translations in Europe. Latin does not have translations in Latin from Greek until the vernacular started challenging Latin, and this Eastern Empire, etc., the Roman Empire, the later-day empire had started declining. So technically, yes, Latin has translations from Greek, but Homer wasn't translated in Latin. Virgil was in Latin. Homer wasn't translated in Latin. It is when the other Latin European languages, what we call, much later we started calling them the Romance languages, they started coming up, that Latin moved to translation. Respectability. That's also a kind of an akrosh there, because these languages, both the vernaculars of the Latin and the bhashas of Sanskrit and the Dravidic group, wanted equality, their right. And in order to claim this respectability and equality, they decided to work on borders of cultures. Even if one were to do a cultural geography of India to figure out where did these people belong, the earliest translators, you find that they're close to where two kingdoms meet. It's not like they are at the capital city of a kingdom. All those poets were there, the translators are opening up two cultures at the same time. It is like somebody, a hunter, sorry, I don't mean cruelty to tigers, but has grabbed two tigers and opening them up, ripping them apart with both hands. A translator is a warrior on two fronts all the time, because she wants that those frontiers to melt down. If I were to put this in philosophical language, I could say that while language by itself is an issue of intersubjectivity, a great experience of intersubjectivity, translation is a higher order intersubjectivity. Let me explain. मुझे ये पता नहीं कि मेरा चित्त, my consciousness, is just my belief or it is really there. I just don't know. I cannot prove myself, my being there. And worse far, I just don't know what Immanuel Kant would call the phenomenal world, the world outside the consciousness, out there. Sat, Sat. I mean that which exists, not Sat in the not Satya, that which exists. Na Sate Vidyato Bhava, na Bhavo Vidyate Sata. That's Sat, the Astitva. I. It's impossible to say that what you think is Astitva is the same as what she thinks is Astitva. There is no unity of Astitvas for any two persons. So there is neither certainty about existence not in the existentialist terms. Reality, let me use that term. There's no certainty about what reality is, what are its dimensions, depth, height, space, time, nor is there certainty about consciousness. However, there is one thing sure, and that these two have a bridge to join them, and that bridge is language. It is through language, it is through word that the world takes place. The world takes birth. It comes into being, not in a metaphoric sense, in purely neurological sense, absolutely in our terms of the way we exist. We imagine time, while time doesn't exist. I mean, dogs, donkeys, horses have no Wednesdays and Saturdays. We have them. We created that. I mean, I envy those animals. I wish if I have no faith in Punarjanma, but if I have a Punarjanma, I would love to be born as a donkey. Sir, welcome me. I mean, welcome me to do it, I mean to say. Time we have imagined, space we have imagined. Language makes us engage with that outside, whatever it is. And therefore, language is a means, language is the only means, language is the only arena where intersubjectivity is possible. Translation has I described as a higher degree intersubjectivity. We discuss, I mean, whether from English to Marathi or Tamil to English or Hindi to Persian or Persian to Gujarati, whatever. We bring so many layers of subjectivity together in the act of translation. And therefore, when civilizations are trying to find equality, dignity, a higher level of existence, translations come to the fore. And always, without any exception, whenever a culture or a civilization has started taking shape, translation is the forerunner on the frontier. I mean, whether it is, say, 19th century, 18th century and 18th century, Asiatic Society translations of Indian works, England was opening up. It's not like they were plundering our works. Similarly, when Malti Madhav was translated by Bhandarkar in 1859, opening up, claiming new space. With all the errors, translators' errors, linguistic errors, grammatical errors, cultural errors, misplacements, misunderstanding, everything. I mean, I understand all those difficulties. I also dabble with some translation theory, and those are complex issues. I accept all that. Having accepted all of those, I'm saying that translation civilizes. It humanizes, because to be human is to be intersubjective. And this is a higher degree of intersubjectivity, higher order of intersubjectivity. I mean, speaking 2, 3, 4 languages make you speak each of those languages far better than you would have spoken if you had been speaking only one.
I'm not saying speaking them better for the sake of others, but for your own soul, your own consciousness, you know that you're able to look at the same fruit, same bird. A bird was mentioned in Bengali bird today, and there are 10 different translations. So this morning it. So chill. So yeah. So you look at that chill with many pairs of eyes at the same time. In our time, I mean, I have been a great enthusiast of translations. I set up a magazine when I was a young lecturer in Baroda. It was called Setu. Again, the bridge, I was aware that this is a bridge between cultures. And when Geeta Dharmarajan started her work, I was among the earliest criminals to join the band. And when Mini Krishnan started the Oxford series, I enthusiastically chose some books for her from Gujarati and from Marathi and so on. So I've been a participant co-criminal with all of you. Count me as one of you. And therefore, from that perspective, I'm looking at two possible risks we are facing today, which I want to place before you. The first is that in the history of evolution of the human brain, for the first time, the Broca's lobe, which analyzes the world, that part of the brain which analyzes the world through language, through sound, is showing fatigue. Children, more autistic children than normal speaking children, you notice. You just cannot force them to read. It's not that they have their what you call IQ is, I mean, their intellectual capabilities are lower. It is that something is happening to the, and the brain. And I'm not talking of African brain, Latin American brain, Australian brain, Canadian, or Department of Physics, or Department of Marathi, or Department of Pali. Is it is a stage in the evolution of Homo sapiens that makes the Homo sapien animal, members of the Homo sapien species, a little indifferent to language as we have known previously. It is therefore, or perhaps because of what I'm going to say, I don't know the cause, and which is the cause and which is the consequence. Humans have marking out a different kind of universe as being out there. And if you look at Nobel Prizes for physics over the last 10 years, you find that most of them are going to the scientists describing negative matter, or describing how the galaxies just have no limit of any outer space at all. Or the more recent one, the idea that the Big Bang took place 1400 crores of years ago, has now been scrapped. And they said they found sound, a light wave, a presence of light prior to 1400 crores, and therefore the size of the universe has expanded way beyond it was there 10 years back. A different kind of universe is being constructed, and also a different kind of space is being constructed. I'll tell you what, you must be using a mobile phone, I'm sure. And it's too late in the day to ask that question. There, when you start Google, something called Meta comes up, steps forward. Now, what is this Meta? You'll say it's name of a company. No, it's not name of a company, it's name of a place. It is short form of metaverse, which is the exact opposite of universe. So it's a different universe being constructed. In that universe, even after I go off as body and bones, my image and my sound captured in this recording together can recreate me as my avatar. People are booking space there, they're buying houses, political parties are setting up their offices in that metaverse. It's going to be a different universe, not our universe. A different universe, which is only image based, without sounds. It will have communication but no language as we understand it. That's not my worry. I mean, I'm terribly worried about it. I'm also excited by what is happening because I would like to see myself as a dead body from the eyes of my avatar in metaverse. See, nobody's done it before. My worry is that intersubjectivity between human consciousness and all that is in the virtual space is zero. There is communication, there is messaging, there is appreciation of meaning, there is giving commands. But the mixing of a consciousness with that consciousness is not possible because that is no consciousness. Tremendously disastrous for translation. Some of you, I mean, my appeal to younger people here is to build a theory around this, to explore how translation between machine brain, machine memory, artificial intelligence, AGI, AIG or whatever, AIG, and the human mind. There will be exchange but no translation. Machine translation, I mean, 25 years, Sukrita, you might remember, 25, 30 years ago, people were telling us, why don't you go to machine translation? And we used to laugh at it because it was making many errors. No, now machine translations don't make errors. They're better than human translators. I mean, we should not shy away from that. But there is no intersubjectivity element. Now, why the hell is intersubjectivity? It is so important. It is on the ground of intersubjectivity that a society gets formed. When people are in virtual space, even a family cannot remain as family. 4 members in the family in the evening go home and keep looking at this, and they don't know who is surrounding them. That's one danger that translation is facing today. That the danger is the world is getting entirely submerged by another space, another quality of consciousness. I cannot call it consciousness. What it can be called, I mean, people have given these terms like cyborg or homo deus, but animal without consciousness. I'm not worried about it being a machine. That's not my problem. I'm worried about it. It has a mind, it has brain, but it has no consciousness. Chitta is achitta, chittahin. In that world, we need translation to save, to shore up whatever little of humans we can. Forget if it is a crude translation, kharab translation, acha translation, award-winning translation, ACB, BCB, CCB, award-winning. Don't a translation. Translation should become dharma for us today. To keep languages alive and to keep this universe alive, to keep intersubjectivity alive, and to keep families and societies intact the way they have been. This is a very orthodox view of the future. But I want to take that orthodox view of the future. My other worry is also about the future. And that is, what I said so far is about the universal situation, about all languages in the world, all cultures, all continents. But I will now turn specifically to India. You've been very sincere people. You've given your life to translation. Publishing a book through a publisher, first translation or second or third, it makes you feel like, it's almost like what Meera would have felt after seeing Krishna. Tapasya ka phal. I am not sure if you are aware that in our country, a monstrous action is building up just next door. And that is, there is a plan of publishing 2,30,000 books in 3 years. Let me explain what this plan is. It is by an organization which is named as Bharat Bhasha Samiti. The office of that Samiti is located in the headquarters of RSS in Delhi. The idea is 2,000 books translated in 121 languages. Which are these 121 languages? 22 scheduled languages and 99 non-scheduled languages listed in the census. So 121 into 2000 makes it 2,40,000. They have engaged people, and the government of India has given them money to engage those people and print those books and publish them, so that from first standard to the to graduation, etc., they will be teaching history, culture, about society, with the idea that walls exist. Externalizing, excluding is proper. I think of my friend, 13th century. His name was Amir Khushru. You remember him. What a fantastic man. Amir Khushru knocked down so many walls. He started writing in a language which was not the language of his parents or his ancestors. He wrote in another language. He brought the south, the north together. He brought music, poetry together. Think of Geet Govind, this painting, dance, music, language, poetry together. Walls being built in the minds of the people. I mean, one attack is on reducing human consciousness into a non-consciousness machine. That's what technology is doing. On the other side, ideology is reducing your activity of translation to a poor joke by imposing, literally bombarding on, I mean, how many millions of school and college children there are in this country? Out of 140 crores, those who belong to the age 5 to age 20, close to 1/5. Crores of people will be, and the closing date is December 28. Ask me why. Because that's also the date they have decided. I mean, I must, do you mind if I divert a little bit from this? There is a, you have heard of SIR. That was a special intensive exclusion process. Exclusion process. SIR, I mean, some every state loses 10 lakh, 50 lakh, 20 lakh, they're non-citizens. Joining with that, they're bringing out a census, completely out of turn. There is an international treaty according to which census has to take place in the first year of a decade. There was corona, therefore most countries did not do that, but 184 countries completed their census in 2023. India did not, Nigeria did not. Ours was postponed to 27, 26, 27. Because 25 years back, there was an act called Delimitation Act, which said that when population levels of different states become steady, the number of MPs can be increased. It's built in the constitution. And so, this after any census after 26, you can do delimitation. Delimitation का मतलब है सीमांकन, दूसरा मतलब है संख्यांकन. The number of MPs will increase. The number of MPs will increase in such a way that Bihar, UP, Rajasthan and Maharashtra will get maximum number of MPs. All others will become non-entities in such a way that one party alone will get close to 80% majority, 80% seats in the parliament of increased numbers, and the increased number is going to be 780, 88, because that's the house, new house is built for that. New house is built for that. It is coming. If you read the census declaration on 22nd December, the, I'm sorry, I'm digressing too much, but let me state it now that I've done the transgression. The fourth objective is to do delimitation. That data is of no use. 2027 data cannot be compared with 2011 data or 2031 data. I mean, it takes just a school kid to tell us that it is uneven data. It is of no use for planning as data. It is of no use. This is only for delimitation. Only for delimitation, increasing the numbers. The census data also can be doctored. I know it from language. In the last census, number of mother tongues reported, total number of mother tongues reported was 1369. But these 1369 mother tongues were pressed into what they call languages. And this is not dialects. Make no mistake. Of these, I have verified at least 780 as languages, not dialects. They pressed into 121. These 121 multiplied by 2000 are the books being produced and dumped into this country. What will happen is the borders that translations dissolve will be rebuilt. Today, you can translate from Urdu to Marathi or Persian to Gujarati, because Gujarat's major literature is in Persian and minor literature is in Gujarati. This is historically correct, accurate description. From the 8th century, well until the 17th century, Gujarat does not have major Gujarati poet. There is a Hemchandracharya who prepared a dictionary. Major poets have been Persian poets, and their impact produced Narsi Mehta, who produced Gandhi. But in Gujarat, a law may come that you cannot translate Persian into Gujarati anymore. I'm saying that the translation activity as we understood. When I say we, I am aware that I am almost an ancient generation and there are young friends. So मैं आपके ऊपर जुल्म गुजारना नहीं चाहता हूँ, लेकिन people who cared for literature, people who cared for a civilized society, people who cared for liberal, open society, and therefore engage in translation. Translation is stepping out of your home to make friends with your neighbor. It's a cultural grace. It is actually dharma. There may not be a word for dharma in another language, but translation itself is kind of the highest religion. That is facing risks on two sides. One from technology, another from ideology. And it is within that terribly unprecedented, severe challenge that if you are translating even one book after retirement, no problem. You did 6 books or 8 books, no problem. You deserve Bharat Ratna. You deserve Bharat Ratna. I mean, a simple mantra. Gandhi would have said, pick up that pinch of salt so that you break the law and resist the British, and that's your decolonization, that's your Hind Swaraj. I will say, wherever you are, whatever you are doing, translate something. Translate. Like mad. Published, unpublished, whatever. It will keep your intersubjectivity alive and therefore the possibility of society. And if you translate and do not get deluged by this, what shall I call it, this bombardment of an ideology by using translation on your minds, I think you will save this country from a great disaster. I will conclude by saying that Milinda Pano, a great Buddhist text, presents an aesthetic category which has been overlooked. It is called Samvega. Samvega. Samvega is, there is a lovely essay by Anand Kumar Swami on Milinda Pano. Samvega. The title of the essay is Samvega in Dance of Shiva, I believe. You have heard of Anand Kumar Swami, of course. If you are not, please hear. And Samvega is an aesthetic category. And I find it very fascinating because Samvega means a moment at which or during which the consciousness becomes fluid, the intellect becomes fluid. It is the same idea that later Rabindranath Tagore used for education. When does a kid, a teacher cannot teach a child? It is in the mind of the child, something happens, the intellect starts flowing out. And this great efflorescence, surplus of emotion, creates knowledge and poetry. That is Rabindranath's, Gurudev's philosophy. I mean, Bangla speakers, please forgive me if I'm making any mistake. Samvega. What we need today is Samvega. That is, that should become the heart of our translation activity. That our minds must flow out to others who have been driven out of the voters list, who are being branded as anti-national, was being branded as Tukde Tukde gang, who are being branded as हमारे enemy थे यहाँ घुसपैठिया. Our minds must go out to them. Our minds must go out to everybody, anybody, anything that is human, irrespective of religion, race, language. And if we can achieve that, then we will have preserved and carried forward the great translation culture of this subcontinent. Dhanyavad.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Devi. I will not even try summing it up because it was so intense. And I'm sure we were all listening to Professor Devi with rapt attention. Uh,
Madam, please allow me to wear my glasses because my eye condition is not.
we began this session with Professor Mohapatra talking about translation as a medium to re-engage with roots. And we are closing this session with Professor Devi's words that translation opens possibility of intersubjectivity and through that possibility of society. And throughout these 2 days, the discussions have made amply clear that translation opens the embedded structures of language and through that miscegenated histories of people which are embedded in literatures of those languages. Translation opens possibility of acknowledging, accepting, embracing those miscegenations. And it is in embracing miscegenations that potential for liberation lies. And therefore, if we have to look at translation today, we have to acknowledge the liberatory potential of translation. And on this note, I will open the session to everyone to ask questions and comments, but I will start with two speakers from yesterday who are here with us, Professor Sukrita, and we also have with us Professor Miss Sudhavati Raghunathan, yeah, Sudhavati Raghunath. I'm so sorry. Yeah. Um, So I will begin with you, and the questions are the same. What it means to translate from Indian languages to English rather than simply translating into English. Does translating from Indian languages into English bring about any change? And the second question that I want everyone to reflect on is translation then a political act? Is this a creative act or a political act or both? So if you could throw, some light.
This is light, but thank you, Ganesh, for this beautiful, as usual, very creative and very comprehensive kind of a vision, which is not in contradiction with what we are all trying to do here, but to bring to our consciousness that this has a direct relevance to the idea of intersubjectivity. I think that's the key, because we talk about how the activity of translation takes us also to the table of negotiation, mediation, understanding, particularly going beyond the superficial level of language as words, but going to the gesture as well. And how all of that creative activity of dance, singing, and writing poetry or anything creative actually brings together the fluidity of a consciousness. Everything flows into it. And it's not an individual. And I've been thinking about this for a long time, particularly after I have been dealing with, as you might know, the oral traditions. And in that context, I really feel that even the name doesn't matter for one individual writing a poem, and this whole nonsense about copyright and, the value of anonymity, for instance, and that's why I think we need to cherish the traditions that we have of the kind that we refer to, which is Kabir tradition. We don't talk about Kabir as an individual, but it's the tradition itself which is flowing like a river, and we just need to dip into it for our own salvation and redemption or whatever. And I think in that context, to become very pointedly aware of what are these dangers, and you have very lucidly brought it out. I mean, this whole question of technology on the one hand, and on the other hand, ideology. And anything creative that we might want to do, whether it is maybe cooking pulao in the kitchen, or cooking ideas in the mind and a poem coming out, if it has to be creative, I think that a fluidity has to come, which comes essentially from breaking the stereotype, breaking the walls, and just submitting to that flow and get into it, submerge into it in all humility without an ego, which really means that the entire universe comes together there. Not just this universe, but perhaps other universes as well. But in order to go to that end, we have to do some exercise of the mind, call it, or whatever tools that we have created for ourselves in terms of communication. Communication, the tools, mechanical communication, a lot of it has been created, but that communication actually has created solitariness of sorts. When, as you rightly said, four people coming back home only to their, this tool. But the tools that we have created which are actually basically intended to civilize us in the proper right way, not as the Britishers going, say, to the area of darkness and saying, I have come here to civilize you and then colonize you. Not that style. But in the same, some kind of plan of the kind that is ideal, where there are no hierarchies. There isn't the colonized and the colonizer. All those walls also, we thought they were breaking. There were moments, in the last, like our careers, we have been trying to think about how to decolonize our minds, etc., etc. But in the process of doing that, we've also therefore indulged in how to own English, which is a tool, coming back to the question that you are posing, translation into English. I think as long as we don't become subservient to English and not anglicize ourselves, thinking of English as his or her master's voice, then I think it has the potential of becoming a language of ours as a bhasha, as one of the bhashas. And I think that is happening because more and more of, um, in our process of translation, even in creative writing, our languages are showing through English, through English. The mask may be of that of English, or English may have done something creative to that as well as a language, which has its own resources. But there is a coming together of our own, like my Punjabi and my Urdu and my Hindi, I think shows up in my writing in English. So somewhere that, and let's not be cynical about our multilingualism. I honestly feel that that's a very solid kind of multilingualism. It may not be, a separate Punjabi as a scripted language. I don't know the script of Punjabi, but I know this Punjabi runs in my blood. I cannot deny the existence of that, but I do not want to have a wall between that Punjabi and my English, for instance. So all that comes into it, and that negotiation, the way it happens, something rich is happening within, I believe. Let's end up with that. I will.
No, that's very true, Sukrita ji. I think most of us would agree with you that it's these walls that we create, the bounded notion or boundary-driven notion of language. Wherein lies the problem? Most of the problems. Sudhamati ji, your thoughts?
Actually, I'm not sure what question you asked me, but I have some answers, which may be. What he said about the confidence to translate into English, whereas the reverse of the confidence to translate back into Sanskrit or is something I don't have and I regret. I think that's a point. The bilingual fluidity is not so strong. I admit, and I think that has to be developed and I don't know how, but that's true. It's very unfortunate or fortunate, I don't know, but I think in English, and when I go abroad, when people ask me, "Oh, so which language do you write in, madam?" I have to say English. I'd rather say Tamil or Sanskrit or Hindi, but I say English, and they say, "Oh," because I'm not a native English speaker, and the attitude is of condescending. "Oh, you write in English? Wow, you must be educated." That is the attitude. So that's one thing I admit, but unfortunately, English runs in my blood, and as she says, it's probably another Indian language now, the way we speak it or whatever it is, and my sensitivities must have penetrated the English language somewhere. But I am now more disturbed by what he has told us. What I'm thinking is, are we to blame? You talk of, on one side technology, the other side ideology. Who built our ideology? When I read the translations of our texts, it's very upsetting. The translator has a responsibility, particularly when you're translating a text which many, many people follow. Then you have to be aware of what you're translating and how you're translating, even if you have to fight with yourself to understand it better and do it that way. The translations that I read, unfortunately, are already building and narrowing my mind. Every translation, every 10 years, every 2 years, there is a translation. What does the translation say? The translation becomes more and more narrow. It follows the previous Hindi or the previous English translation. How many times have you read the original in Sanskrit? I do not know. So I feel the ideology that exists today is a result of the translations that have been done over the past so many years that have narrowed our minds. We have not understood what we have. Therefore, we have a narrow mind. When yat pinde tat brahmande, you don't know what is in that pinde. You don't know your own religion. What are you talking of building ideologies? Because you don't know that, you build false ideologies. That is my conviction and my, in fact, my sorrow when I read translations. I mean, this is a generalization. There are excellent translations too. But on an average, if you go to on an average translation, this is. And the other question you had raised was, when we come back, we all pick up the phone. That's one part of the story. The other part is, how much of language do we speak? We say, बीच बीच में इंग्लिश आ जाता है, कभी कभी you say, you add a phi to something and say, आज we had, you anglicize a Hindi word. Where is the grammar? Where is the elegance? Where is the diction? Where is the vocabulary in any language you speak, whether it is Hindi or it is English or it is Tamil? I don't think the beauty of the elegance of speech, I think, is lost. When elegance of speech is lost, then how can you translate elegantly? You're not able to appreciate the elegant mind behind that beautiful script that was once upon a time written, because you're translating it in crass language. So I feel these are the, I'll finish it with one example. The Amaru, is a poet, ancient poet who wrote in Prakrit and Sanskrit. His Amaru Shatakam is in Sanskrit. It's all erotic love poems, and hero tells the Naika, Kopane, in anger, oh, you angry girl, turn to me. And a translation says, you bitch, turn to me. Now, what can I do with that book? Tell me. And it's a well-publicized book. It's a beautiful, feigned anger. My friend Amaru would have got up from his grave and come to say. Exactly. So, how can you then say that the ideology is false? We have translated it like this, and we have misunderstood it, and the beauty is lost, and we've given way to, very narrow definitions of, as you said, humanization. Where is the humanization? So, that's all that thank you.
Thank you, Sudha. You have answered my question without understanding, so that's perfect.
Now you can ask the question.
No, that is fine. We also have with us Srinath Perurji. So I'm a big fan of your translation. I recommend it to all my students that they must read it as kind of, model. So please, if you can also reflect on 2 days and what should be the takeaways, what should we, think of translation, and especially because younger scholars are here. So what is your, message for them?
I don't know that I have any message for scholars, because I don't think of myself as one. And that has actually been one of the interesting things about these 2 days, that there have been a number of academics, and it gave me some sort of window into, I guess, how these things are thought of. So personally, I come at translation from an angle of aesthetics. I Whereas I found that a lot of the conversation around translation tended to be more programmatic in some sense, as in which categories are getting translated, what should be getting translated, and what are the pitfalls of that, and so on. So there is something quite naive about my approach, and which is all right. I think sometimes good things come out of naive approaches and can be built on by others who have different kinds of insights. Just now when Sudhama was saying something about thinking in English, it reminded me that for many years I would get annoyed when people asked me which language I thought in. Because I thought of thinking in a language as these intermediate steps that we do when we're having a conversation. maybe calculating 2 steps ahead how I'm going to impress somebody and what I'm going to. And this usually happened in my case in the language that I was talking in. I use Kannada, I use Hindi, I use English, and depending on the context, I would have some sort of processes going on in my head in those specific languages. But then a few years ago, I learned something which explained something about my own process of translation, which is that I struggle quite a lot to translate from Kannada to English. And in fact, when Professor Devy was talking about languages growing in capacity when we translate from them, I was thinking that doesn't seem to be the case when I am working between languages, because I feel when I translate from Kannada to English that both my languages start becoming shaky. My prepositions, for example, because I believe these words stand for constructs that are actually underneath the words themselves. For example, you often see newspaper headlines that say, in the Bollywood section, that uh, someone is dancing on a song. Now, this may be a literal translation of, Gane pe nachna. And so this is not natural English for, say, somebody coming from the South, because we don't use the same constructs. But they do. And so prepositions are very sensitive indicators of what is going on at some sort of subsurface level. So I had a great deal of difficulty, for example, in dealing with multi-clause Kannada sentences. Uh, so it would feel like my head was going to explode, because I had to keep so much information inside in order to, uh, make sure that that information is still available to me, and that I'm actually laying it out in a readable, hopefully enjoyable English sentence, and enjoyable in the context of the larger work and so on. And I discovered a paper that was published some years ago, which studied, a large group of people who spoke different languages as their mother tongues. And it found that, so there are languages which are considered left branching and right branching, right? Where the verbs, English, for example, verbs come towards the middle, and in most of our Indian languages, I think they go to the end. And they found that they have a difference in the structure of the brains. So people who deal with languages like Kannada, they end up having extra capacity for storing information, because the payload happens at the end. So there is actually a physical difference that happens to us based on what languages we speak. And I was thinking of this again when Professor Devi talked about the power of languages, that when we work with multiple languages, we actually change something inside us, a capacity to be more accepting, a capacity to see more widely. And I think there is a kind of permanent, in many cases, physical change that it brings about. And I really enjoyed that endorsement of, huh.
General impression, this is in the 50s, 40s and 50s and 60s, that if you have to appoint a steno typist, it's good to have somebody from Tamil Nadu, because their memory to remember and reproduce is higher. Honestly, yeah, somebody from Tamil Nadu used to be paid more than nobody from Maharashtra was at all given that job. In Fort area, there were no Maharashtra employees. Marathi employees, Sachin is laughing, but that's it. They had to be, they had to be restricted up to Dadar, the worst. In textile में वो धोबी का जैसा हिसाब रखने के लिए. So maybe that is true. Maybe that's why, but this is to take it too much further might land us in some kind of racist observation.
Yeah.
So,
I think we should
while
resist.
it is appreciated, I think we should quietly appreciate and leave it.
Yeah. I was also thinking when Sachin was talking about English, about what is possible in English and what is not. Uh, so, for example, one of the thoughts I was thinking when you were speaking was that if a good novel can be written in English by an Indian, then it is possible to translate with equal felicity, perhaps. Uh, so I do think of English as an Indian language now, uh, in that I don't think twice, or I don't feel uh, inauthentic in any way when I am using English. And so I find it quite natural, I think, in many ways. And it has another effect which I have experienced myself, which is that, one of my translations, once it appeared in English and became popular, it received an interest from other Indian languages. So it facilitated, not directly, but it facilitated translations between Indian languages in several ways. And given the status of English right now in today's world, I think it might be a pragmatic, you know, thing for the time being to have translations in English, and I think it works quite well.
I was not against English or even against English translations. I was trying to point out the relationship between English and Bhasha, which has been traditionally in India been of a subtractive kind. Means acquisition of English very often leaves us with depleted ability to use Kannada or Marathi or Tamil. So if we can shift it into more an additive kind of relationship, is what I was trying to get at,
Right.
rather than say that we don't need English or English is something from outside.
Yeah.
It's we are past that now by 200 years to say all these things.
Yeah.
So I was not trying to say that English translation should not happen or even on those lines.
Right.
But while we are thinking about translation in India, English cannot be the only point of reference.
True.
Means what is happening between Marathi and Gujarati, or Hindi and Marathi, or Bangla and Tamil. All these transactions are also something that we should take on board while thinking about translation in India, rather than stick to just Bhasha English, from Bhasha to English only.
Of
So
course.
that's the only thing that I was trying to
That's
get
very
at.
true.
Yeah.
Which also reminds me that the last thing I translated has a lot of its action set in urban corporate offices. And rendered in Kannada, it didn't feel quite as convincing to me because the characters in this Kannada novel were actually speaking English. So the author had translated half the novel in his head from Kannada to English already. And so a lot of this, because I know the setting and the type of character, the translation process was basically, reimagining this stuff in English. Again, we live in a very complex linguistic landscape, and these things work in strange ways. But I've had a really wonderful couple of days, especially because so many people here are unknown to me. And I mean, to be honest, after I listen to someone 3 or 4 times, I find that they're saying the same thing usually. And since I didn't know anyone here, I listened to everyone with pretty much as much fascination. So, um, I may be a bit cynical, but I hope to be pleasantly surprised the next time I run into all these people. So thank you, Chandra, for inviting me. It was really a wonderful experience to have been here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Srinath. Now, if anyone else wants to add anything, if any one of you have anything urgent to say or ask, because we have really come full circle. We began with the note, as I just pointed out, where Professor Mohapatra mentioned that translation is reconnecting to the roots. Translation is a medium to reconnect with roots. And everyone here, we are coming back to this, that it's in the process of translation that you get to the bottom of the, what is happening, or at least the processes that have gone into the making of the text. So translation is a process of discovery, not just recovery. And going to Walter Benjamin, which we can't really help quoting Benjamin, who talks about how translation opens up connections between languages. So the purpose of translation is not simply to convey meaning, but it also opens up, relationship or connections between languages. So can we then? You want to say something?
I just wanted to say that translation for people like me who have been alienated from our languages because of our educational system. I mean, I didn't study in an English medium school. I went to an Oriya medium school. I studied up to matriculation in the Oriya medium. And then, for the first time, I had the courage to carry on a conversation in English when I was studying my MA in English. So, but in the process, ironically, I was completely cut off from my own language because English was presented as a larger than life kind of entity. So,
And yet all great Oriya writers were graduates of English literature.
yeah, many of them. Yes, yes. That is true.
Not just Oriya, I think
Gopinath
that's the
Mohanty.
scene with most Indian languages. Yeah.
Gopinath Mohanty.
Hmm. No, I'm saying that's the scene with most Indian languages. All major writers happen to be English graduates, maybe because education opened the door to publishing, writing, and publishing. So it has been very, very fruitful 2 days, and we conclude maybe with final remarks from Chandraji.
Fine. Thank you so much, Nishat. Yes, Chandradi, I am to you. Thank you so much for really masterminding this whole session this afternoon superbly. And of course, I said last word, but the last word was said by Professor Devy much before the others said their last words. I'm feeling a little overwhelmed at how beautifully these 2 days seminar has gone. We have been given a lot of stuff to think about, and as I've been telling all the speakers, I think it may yet happen that we try to put together all the proceedings, edited, expanded into kind of a monograph on translation. Just across the board, all the things, because I wouldn't want these insights to be just for these 2 days, but to be put together in a kind of, which I think students would also appreciate and will be able to dip into and go back or talk to the people whom they have heard today, yesterday, and so on. But thank you very much. I hope all of you will come and join us for a cup of. See, we forgot about even tea and coffee in between. So it's being served there. So please come and join. Thank you so much.
Chandra, I would like to put it on record also because I think the seminar that we had in August, was it the first one? Yeah, so that one and this one, if it can all be put together, that would be great
That's
as a monograph. But I was thinking that Uma has not been with us. I hope everything is fine. Please convey our thanks and
Yes,
everything to her.
It's not, but that's a personal story of great grief.
Oh.
And she is missing this whole thing. And yes, not only the round table, I meant even the proceedings of the 15th. No, before that, we had a wonderful half day seminar on publishing for children. And their translation was very much part of what the speaker spoke about, the need to translate for children, not like what Professor Devi has warned us against, but something which was really appealing to the children. So I meant including that as well, and the roundtable, with the conference translation seminar in Bangalore. There again, so many of the points that we have been discussing in the last 2 days, it's really taking those points forward. So I meant all the four. This is to celebrate the book review turning 50, and I think I'm feeling really enthusiastic about putting all these things together. We are, of course, printing them all separately also. The proceedings of these 2 days will be published maybe in the June issue of the book review, because you need a lot of space to print the whole thing. But ultimately, that's my take, that we should do this. Thank you.
After
Just a small
at 51
announcement. Yeah.
gets into, traditionally, Vanaprasthan. So, book review should get into the forest of translations.
Yes.
The book review can come out in some other languages as well. That's what I'm saying.
Oh, that
Yes.
is a very, very good idea.
So,
yes.
book review in Tamil, book review in English, and book review in Hindi.
But we do have a translation series, which again we want to, reprint and so on. So there's
Before we disperse, Chandradi, allow me to make an announcement. The series of events have not ended. There's one more event schedule, which is in collaboration with the Sarojini Naidu Center, Jamia Millia Islamia. It will be in Jamia Miranis Hall day after tomorrow. It's called Women, Words and Worlds. So please be there, those of you in Delhi. We'll share the program.
Well, to add to that, it's certainly not ended. On the 7th of March, we have the 4th Nikhil Chakravarti Memorial Lecture. The first three were delivered by Professor Amartya Sen, Professor Eric Hobsbawm, and Professor Romila Thapar. This is going to be the fourth one, because without Nikhil Chakravarti stepping in way back in 78, the book review would have died a natural death, because all of us were going away from Delhi and we were not going to be able to continue it. But it's his offer to take it over and keep it going till one of us came back, which I did in 85. So that is how we instituted that memorial lecture. And there's one more announcement which Sucharita will tell you about. Short story. Please. Somebody was asking.
Yeah. So, on the occasion of the 50th anniversary of the book review, we had a short story contest which started last year. We announced it last year, and we got a lot of entries, very encouraging. And we are going to be announcing the results of that short story contest on the 7th of March at the Nikhil Chakravarti Memorial.
Second one.
Sorry,
The
7th
first-
March.
No, so second one.
This is
The first-
yes, this is the second. We had the first round already in 2020. We worked on it. We selected the winners, and in 2024, the book came out anthologized as The Thief's Funeral, book review anthology of short fiction, published by the Aleph Book Company. So please, those of you who are interested in short stories, please go out, buy it, read it, and let us know what you thought of it while we work on the next edition, which I hope we'll be able to bring out sometime this year. Thank you so much.